Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. I'm Clements here with my dear friend and prolific author and mindfulness coach and teacher, transformational intelligence, emphasizing intelligence, savant, Ora Nadrich. And I'm honored to be a guest in her home with her husband, Jeff. As you'll see in our seamless, natural conversation, we've been talking for decades. And I'm, what should I say, deeply honored and something close to thrilled to dive into her newest book, which has just been released. And I really want to emphasize for those who are watching and those who tune in tomorrow, next week, next month, 10 years from now, look this book out. Rare to put mindfulness and mysticism together. And it just touches a deep place in my own heart, which we'll get into. But more importantly, a chance for us to talk and discuss and openly engage you in a dialogue with us and ancestors and celestial deities and beings and, evoking our own bodhisattvic spirit today for the betterment of a world that seems to be in some degree of collapse, to put it mildly. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in today. Mindfulness and Mysticism by my beloved dear friend Ora Nadrich. And I want to just put out there very quickly, it's available worldwide on online booksellers, obviously Amazon, Barnes & Noble, so on and so forth. This is a book not just to read, this is a book to keep out. And may I emphasize, gift. Gifting is so rad, so cool that it's one thing to serve our own transformational awakening. Yes, read, study, anoint, highlight. Don't read a book. Don't put it down. Don't give it up. Stay with it for months. This is one of those rare books. Mindfulness and Mysticism. And gift it to people, especially today in this epoch of what appears to be darkness. And Ora, you will see in her own humble way, a very humble being, and a very intelligently compelling being, brings forth a radiance, a luminosity in the world today that is not only much needed, but it is essential for our psychological, spiritual, and I will end here, our mystical, think of that, a mystical well-being. And I want to explore this topic with her and with you on this beautiful April 10th Sunday here from Los Angeles. So from my heart to yours, thank you. Nora, thank you for taking the moment to discuss your book and your life.
Thank you so much for making this happen.
I'm honored.
My dear friend.
Namaste. Now, where to begin? Well, I'll begin with what compels me about you. Is that you were born in Tel Aviv. You've come to this country, Los Angeles, with your family and your mother and your father, and you've made a life in America. You've made a life in Los Angeles. You've been intimately engaged, correct me anywhere that you see me wrong, intimately engaged in creativity, in conscious engagement with human interaction, acting, filmmaking, screenwriting, books, Transformational Institute, coaching, mindfulness savant expert. You evolved in a context where very few people really do reach to the level of what I call mindful intelligence and mindfulness and mysticism. And one of the things I love about you is that you have always kept taking it higher. And so, what is mysticism to you? Simple.
Mysticism is so many things. really. I do very much resonate to Evelyn Underhill, who was a Christian mystic. When she defined it, in one of her definitions, is that it's being in union with reality. So, for me, one has to ask, well, what reality are we speaking of? Because reality is different for you as it is different for me. And that reality can be filled with multitudinous for both of us and maybe limited for somebody else. So in that definition of in union with reality, I feel that it's the reality of which we create, that we are the authors of our reality. We are the storytellers of our reality. And in that reality, it goes very deep, very wide, very far. The mystical experience is the experience that connects us, aligns us with, and keeps us in union with that which perhaps isn't visible always to the eye, or cannot maybe be defined, if you will. We're used to defining things in ways that sometimes can be very limiting, you know? And for me, the mystical experiences is all of the things that are visible and perhaps invisible, able to be uttered or perhaps ineffable.
Beautiful.
And that they are the things that personally for me connect me to what would be described as divine, sacred, and holy.
Love it. You know, jumping right into one of the functions from my understanding of mindfulness is the immediacy of a felt experience of present time awareness, which is the subtitle of your book, Connecting Present Moment Awareness with Higher States of Consciousness. A gorgeous subtitle. How can let's just say if we're speaking with the collective mindfulness student, coaches, and teachers of the world, and they're listening attentively, how can I integrate mysticism into the felt immediacy of mindful present time presence? How can I expand my mindfulness to just the bare attention of the phenomena, to a mystical phenomena of the present?
Well, the whole notion of present moment awareness. So we are in these moments within moments within moments, which seem infinite, really. So you're present in the moment of which you are in. And depending on how present you are, is how deep and expansive that moment can be. Do you know? So think of what that moment can really create. Do you know? It's infinite, and it's the moments of which we are in that we don't really drop into the vastness of that moment, because we are living in a world that really does everything it possibly can to take you out of the moment. Do you know? We're living in a world which is just teeming with distraction and stimuli and overstimulation and the bombardment of, why don't we do everything we can to take you out of this moment? When in fact, if we are left alone to be in the moment of which we are in, imagine the abundance that one can realize in that moment. It is transformative. It is mystical. It is multidimensional. That moment can be anything and everything. So it's that dichotomy, it's that dualistic state that we're in all the time. We're being pulled out of the moment, and yet for me personally, I want to keep that moment as close to my heart as I can, because I know that that moment is ready to offer me so much.
You know, one of the troubling things I have with like words like sacred and divine, and is how they intersect with all the things that we know: Ukraine, Russia, refugees, rape, genocide, the Holocaust. Your family are survivors of the Holocaust. How does the word and the energy of the mystical and divine and the sacred, in some way, diving right in deep, intersect with evil?
Well, you know, you say divine, sacred, and holy, and that can connote it in a religious context. Do you know that we think of those words only in the experience or in the relationship to that which is perhaps religious? Do you know, people go to places of worship And that's when they maybe feel closer to God or God presence or something that feels like it is sacred or, unity consciousness, source. I don't like to dive into those words, but they're the ways in which we can express that which could feel otherworldly or beyond our animal instincts, And to your question, Alan, I feel that what you really are talking about, you're talking about a war that's existing between Russia and Ukraine. And why do we go to war? We go to war because we either are having religious conflicts, there's the desire to kill off those that aren't like you, or they're of a different religious, of a different belief, of a different spiritual proclivity. To me, these are the ideas, or control, wanting to have control of other. What is that control? So within everybody is this spiritual essence that I feel that it is always under attack somehow, whether we're in an actual war of a country against another country, or we're in a spiritual war with each other. We are vying for these positions against one another to control and to dominate so that we can take ownership of what? Someone else's beliefs, someone else's holiness, someone else's what they deem sacred to them. And it doesn't have to be, again, that of a god or a deity. A blossoming rose can be sacred to you. But if someone wants to come along and chop off the heads of all those roses because they don't feel you should be smelling the divine aroma of those roses, what's behind that? Control, a type of tyranny. This is what we're witnessing over and over and over again.
Beautiful. What do you feel, and this is a very practical question, what in your book, Mindfulness and Mysticism, if there's a section, a chapter that touches you the most among many, all of it, where would you say you resonate the most with what you've written?
I really resonate to each and every chapter, to be honest with you. I wrote each chapter as if I was living through it. So each of the chapters in the book really is a culmination of the each bead that's thread on a necklace. That's what each chapter means to me. In relation to the times that we're in right now, what feels most resonant are the chapters on good and evil, light and dark, if you will, whatever you choose to call the energies that we perceive that see more of the light and those that see more of the darkness.
If you were on the stage at Wisdom 2.0 with John Kabat-Zinn, who's advocated the importance of mindfulness in the military, mindfully look through the scope of your automatic rifle as you assassinate more mindfully the enemy. I've seen generals on counters and in stages talk about the power of mindfulness. When I hear the word mysticism, I feel innately the power of awe and wonderment and nonviolence and discretion and discernment and circumspect, putting down the weapon, right?
Yes.
You're talking to the world about a very rarely discussed topic that brings mysticism, the sacred and the awe and the wonderment of the phenomena of existence to the power of mindfulness. It's ubiquitous worldwide, it's everywhere, it's in the military, it's in the sports, it's in the courts, but it's not often in the soul.
Exactly.
What would you say to those who right now are advocating mindfulness in the military? I would say introduce mindfulness and mysticism into the military.
Right, because if you're really introducing the whole idea of what does it mean to be present, and present with what you are doing, or who are you, and what is in your beingness of the moment that you're in, asking, as you said, someone in the military, if it's the training to fight the enemy, if it's the training to even have to kill the enemy, if needs be, that becomes the identity, that becomes the persona of that person. That's the role of fulfillment that they set out to do for what they perceive as the betterment for who really? For their own country, for their people, not maybe recognizing that this type of violence is harmful to whoever you're inflicting that on. Mm-hmm. So you can introduce mindfulness and let somebody be present, but I would say, who are you in the moment that you're holding the gun? Mm-hmm. Who are you in the moment that you're shooting somebody? Who are you in the moment of killing? Who is that person?
So you're you're advocating a kind of mystical morality in a way that has principles and values, that the word sacred and awe and wonderment and mysticism are rooted in a discernment at a core psychological, emotional level.
Yes, yeah.
So would it be too far-fetched to say what you've advocated in your book? That mysticism should be understood as an ethical intelligence with the mysticism?
I think mysticism, because it's perceived by some that, or not perceived by many, they don't really know what it means, and I really wanted to demystify mysticism.
Good point. Demystifying mysticism.
Exactly. And
Beautiful.
that the whole idea of perhaps something like the mystical experience, which seems maybe far-fetched for somebody. They don't even know what that really means or looks like. And explaining again that what if you were to perceive it as the place that you go, the temple within, and there you find the truth, and there you find that violence does not belong in our hearts. I really widen the lens of the mystical experience, because it could be anywhere from the sunrise, the sunset, looking into a lover's eyes, holding a baby in your arms. When you are that heartfelt and deeply connected to the heart, the soul of your beingness, then you are accessing the mystical. You're inviting it in, you're welcoming it to say, violence doesn't belong in the mystical experience.
Beautiful. There's so many meditators in the world today. Not enough, but there's a lot. And of course, mindfulness and meditation go very much close hand in hand. How would a mindfulness meditator right out of Santa Monica, right out of New York City, right out of San Francisco, who's listening, watching, hears about your book, Mindfulness and Mysticism, how can they introduce mystical mindfulness to a meditation practice?
Yeah, I think that...
So they're more sensitive to that.
Yeah, let's bring in more to that experience. And when I say bring in more, let's bring in what is most natural. It's not just meditation in the way in which it's been introduced into the Western world, and that we subscribe to those teachings or those modalities, and perhaps never even entertain the possibility of what does mysticism mean when we bring it into the meditative experience.
Exactly. Well, that's crucial. That would be what I would hope we would do more of. I would like to see that mindfulness and ethical intelligence and spiritual intelligence and numismatic intelligence and mystical intelligence, essentially, get over the word intelligence, just the absence of violence.
Right.
Mindfulness in the absence of violence, Mr. Putin. Absence in the violence of any forever war. That to me is like, how do we get in? I guess, let me ask you this question. We've heard words like epiphany. We've heard words like awe and wonderment. How do you envision igniting the awe emotion experience in the mind of other in a way in which they say, listen, I struggle. I'm in psychiatry, I'm in psychology, I've been low dosing, I've been high dosing. It's not really working. I've done ayahuasca, it's coming out of my orifices. What I want is to induce something, a mystical awe. What would you say, or say like 3 or 4 things that someone could do?
Well, I think that...
Look at the stars at night?
Absolutely. I even have a stargazing exercise, as far as, there's a day and a night exercise ritual that I propose in the book about, we're talking, I'm looking out the window, I'm seeing this gorgeous tree here that we planted when we bought this house, and it was just a baby tree, which was at one time a seed, as we know.
Goodness.
And this is a huge tree, and the wind is blowing outside, and the leaves are moving beautifully, the undulation of the leaves. Alan, I don't ever not see this. And if I'm not paying attention, I look out to nature to remind me that that is truth in its most sacredness. That is it, right there. The nature of that tells me what my nature is.
So like a free-flowing, reflective interdependence that gives you a deeper context to something rather than just the immediacy of an ambition.
Yes. And also, you know, when we speak of higher states of consciousness, do you know, I think that when we are really in the cosmic dance of life, when we are not separated from anything or anyone, we start to feel those chemicals in our brain start to become active.
It's interesting, looking through your book and reading portions of it, I felt like I was reading a kind of adult fairy tale, which evoked in me a type of cool. Someone is being real about what I've always had to repress and confine to this little children's book called Something That Happened Decades Ago. You know, and it's sort of like, oh God, you just came from Maui Island, no wonder you're so into mysticism and all. But you know, enough of normalcy of craziness. Yes. And so when I hear the word mysticism, I guess what's the opposite of trauma or grieving? Rejoicing?
Yes.
Okay, I'm rejoicing in your creation.
Yes.
That you spent all this time in your heart and mind and research with so many different people. This book isn't just about Ora Nadrich. I've seen so many people in here that you've brought forth. So many quotes, so many reflections. It's like it's an orchestra of the mystical.
Thank you. You know, I really, my existential question is, why do we allow for ourselves to be taken out of the mystical experience, really? If we start with that as our fundamental place of truth, that we live in a mystical realm, that we are mystical creatures. So we're that, and then there's this current in life that's always trying to take us away from that. It's like beckons us away from that which is exquisite and wants to bring us into the harsher realities of life. Okay, perhaps there are many different realities of life. It's multi-reality, if you will, multi-dimensional, as I said. But why don't we start with the fact that I'm in a euphoric state of being alive? So what am I to wait for life to tell me otherwise?
Yeah, it really begs the question that we need more leaders, not just thought leaders, that introduce and bring forth these deeply primal, beautiful formations that allow the human mind with the animals and the trees and the birds to coexist with a sense of awe rather than the pragmatism of capitalism and competition and ambition and forever stock options that only make, you know, the end of Earth.
Why is that so threatening? You know, it comes to mind of, let's say, somebody who's just high on life, and somebody who is not able to get high on life can look at that person and think they're crazy, or that they're wasting their time, or they must be, you know, some kind of, you know, granola eating hippie. These stereotypes of the way in which we look at somebody who's genuinely happy, or who is able to access the bliss of being alive, who wakes up every morning and, as you say, on the in-breath and the out-breath, feels the ecstasy of being one more day alive. Why are we to look at people like that and think, oh, they're crazy, or what a waste of time? You know, you have to be successful, you have to do all these things, you have to fight, you have to kill, you have to do all these things that are completely, are moving us away from the true essence of who we are. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Commodification of stupidity.
Yeah. Yes,
and the
exactly.
normalization of that.
And wanting to normalize it, the normalization of that, especially right now. We are being bombarded with this, you know, I consider it to be, I view it as an energy, if you will, of those that are wanting to control this cosmic dance. They don't want it to be anything but cosmic. They want to take us out of that realm and bring us into something like metaverse. Let's create an alternate reality that isn't even real, because this reality is so horrible. Well, who's making this reality so horrible? So those that are making or have made this reality so horrible, they want to take us into a virtual reality that's supposed to be better.
So what would you say if we had the AI gurus in the room or listening to this with regard to what is mysticism and transhumanism for you and the metaverse? Where do they intersect, if at all?
That's a very good question. I mean, obviously we're moving quite quickly into the future, and artificial intelligence and virtual realities will and are becoming the new normal. But there isn't just one new normal. There's many types of normal, and each of us has a sovereign right to realize what that is for us in our lifetime. I'm very concerned about this need to dehumanize us and to create this transhumanistic agenda that wants to strip us, that wants to just suck every morsel of spiritual life out of us to make us more like machines. Do you know? It's some kind of fantasy. It's a fetish with machines to take over man.
The absence of the spirit, the absence
Complete
of the
absence.
mystical.
Complete absence. And for people that, you know, find that all very titillating and very exciting. I mean, one could say, well, there was a time when there were no airplanes, and that was very exciting. And the next thing, we were flying into space in this big piece of metal, you know, surrounding us. And if we didn't allow for those things to happen, we wouldn't have, you know, modern man being able to do modern man things. But I believe that if we don't raise our consciousness, we will create things that will be our undoing.
See, that phrase, raise our consciousness, you know, just a slight digression to me personally. You know, I left the city 50 years ago to become a Buddhist monk. And for the very purpose of spending years in reflection and poetry, and all of us in the 60s and 70s, and of course today as well, have explored the psychedelic. But it was just, you know, just to state the obvious, it became really burdensome for me to come down and not really understand the pathways to raise consciousness and keep it raised. I could get it up, but it would come down. So meditation, mindfulness training, and a sustained silent practice in Burma, where I lived in a monastery, I know you know that, became the developmental practices of raising one's awareness and consciousness. And inevitably we experience mystical experiences. We experience deities and devas, and even dealt with, you know, I dare say, very odd paranormal complexities. So the mystical isn't just heavenly. You have access to Ukraine and Russia's, even in that realm as well.
Right.
I guess I'm going into the question, well, let's go into the question of the psychic intuitive. And in your own meditative, mindful practice, how much does intuition, pre-intuition, psychic intuitive, clairvoyant, practical clairvoyance, practical telepathy, deep sensibilities to things that are unsaid and heard, that are asymmetrical to logic, how much do you live in that world, if you will? Can you reveal your interior a bit like that?
Yes, you know, I feel as though I've lived in that world since I was a little girl. Do you know that I was very much listening for that which was not visible?
You're speaking to so many people. Please go on.
Do you know, and that things that felt very magical to me as a little girl was where I wanted to be. And whether that was me dancing, free-falling into a dance as a little girl, and imagining that I was in this realm that felt very lightness of being. There was no denseness of the interruptions, the intrusions of life, especially with a young psyche. You know, that's why children can go into imaginary realms so easily. Do you know? And when we're that open and that fresh and that pure, we're able to access these wonderful abilities that we have, that we are very much connected to our intuition. And our intuition feels very unfettered and it feels undisturbed. So for me, I was always a very highly intuitive child. And I was always able to imbibe or to intuit what others were feeling, which now we would say is being an empath or somebody who's compassionate. Do you know? I think children feel this naturally. Do you know? And that's what needs to be cultivated. That's what needs to be developed in us when we're these pure beings as children, which is immediately interrupted, you know, by going into the educational system, not at all supporting teaching children meditation or mindfulness, which should be absolutely required in schools.
Beautiful. I'm just thinking to myself as you're talking and interpreting what I'm hearing inside of myself, listening to you and all that kind of thing that happens when you're personal. And I'm thinking of what a timely gift your book is today, and the importance, how should I put it, that I feel of, I mean, it's to state the obvious analogy, there's so much emphasis today in the, say in the yoga asana world, but very few people really do an interior asana towards the mystical. Mm-hmm. You know, I know so many meditators that are pragmatists, that are disciplined in the taste of food when they eat it. But they don't really look, as you did so naturally, at the tree that you planted with a seed and see where that food came from and possibly imagine who grew it, to use a Thich Nhat Hanh interdependence analogy. And deeper than that is, you know, having been trained in classical esoteric Buddhism, I look at you and you look at me and I look at people that I know, and we could have been family and friends for eons in previous lifetimes, the ecosystem of the existential. So you're opening up dimensionality. So you're teaching a retreat at Omega coming up.
Yes.
This summer, which is going to explore these topics. What are some of the things that you might offer at this retreat?
I'm going to be doing it with Dr. Ron Alexander, who you know, who's a mutual friend and has a book coming out in June on creativity. And and I have a chapter in my book as well on creativity. I think it's really going to couple creativity and mysticism, basically. That's really the essence of the workshop, which will be about, because what I really explored in Mindfulness and Mysticism was, you know, what is the creative experience really? You know, again, it's very subjective, it's personal, but that there are people who feel that they're very much at the effect of the creative spirit, I said, yes, it is of the spirit. The creative experience can be one that they feel eludes them. They can't quite hold on to it. It comes when it comes and it goes as it goes. Or for writers, for those of us that are authors, many people experience what they call a writer's block. And what I really propose in Mindfulness and Mysticism is that when we are open to the numinous, to allow ourselves to be in awe, to allow ourselves to look at a tree and free fall into the exquisiteness of it, we're in the dance, we're in the creative dance. Do you know, I love the story of Rumi, who was going to a blacksmith and heard the sound of a hammer, in a repeated sound of a hammer, you know how a hammer goes, and listened to the sound of the hammer, and it became a type of rhythm that he started to, you know, do the whirling dance to.
Oh wow!
Do you know, because it became a beat. It became a beat. Do you know?
Right.
And so I think along with Ron, we're going to explore that the creative experience doesn't have to be elusive. You know, it can be something that we can summons and then avail ourselves to it.
Awesome.
I love the dance of that. I love that it's this ongoing dance, and we needn't stop dancing.
So you and Ron, do you have dates for that particular?
It's October, oh gosh, it's on the tip.
But Omega Institute in New York, right?
In October.
Ryan Beckner,
yes.
Look it up.
I believe maybe October 21st to the 28th, but I'm not 100% sure.
So you'll be offering techniques, methods, practices.
Practices, meditations, you know, creative movement, yoga, being able to really trust the creative spirit. to summons it forward, to know what that looks like, types of techniques and modalities, so that it doesn't become elusive to you.
Beautiful. You know, way back when I did my book Instinct for Freedom in 2003, I used the phrase mystical activism to get over the spiritual activism.
Beautiful.
But what I'm hearing you and Ron, especially you in your book, you're offering mystical pragmatism, mystical meditation, and you're infusing the word mystical with the human capacity, the natural human capacity to embrace dimensionality, the psychic intuitive, the sacred feminine in all of us, to use something that's hard to define, and you're offering, correct me if I'm wrong, you're offering tools and practices.
Yes.
This isn't just some mystical, philanthropy of the tongue.
Exactly. And
You're
to really
pragmatist.
and to really have those experiences, and we know that the experience itself is what really illuminates.
So this is mystical 2.0 practice.
Exactly.
That's a big distinction between you and the astrologists, you and the palmists, you and the psychics. That's brilliant. And on a little bit of a different trajectory, I grew up in Virginia near the Edgar Cayce Foundation, who was one of the world's top psychics and healers, could go into trance, as we all know,
Right.
and just from a distance, advocate with eyes closed through intermediaries how to heal someone. And there was 10,000 cases. I did my 9th grade thesis on clairvoyance. And over the years, Burma, which is a deep study of esoteric Buddhism, I was surprised, Lord, how many of the classical Buddhist texts reference the mystical phenomenology.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the deep, natural training of raising consciousness, which you use, your phrase, which is another way of looking more intimately at the word meditation.
Right.
It's good it's really, let me just pause. It's good to take these words and mystify them in a pragmatic way to overcome this bare attention propaganda. Hey, listen, I was an advocate for years. Bare attention, like a windshield wiper on the consciousness of the windshield of your mind, wiping off greed, wiping off shame, which it works well. But we need to see that, my God, it's more than just being present. It's what we do in that present time phenomena. Remember, connecting present moment awareness. Yes, I'm passionate about this. I want to end violence, especially in men, with higher states of consciousness. You can't get a more important subtitle with a book on mindfulness. And it's pragmatic. We need to infuse mindfulness. Hear me, guys. Hear you, coaches. Hear you, all you teachers. Take it out of the mundane.
Thank you.
50 years of mindfulness and the world has gotten worse because there's not mystical awakening in it.
Exactly.
Thank you
yes,
for your book.
Exactly right, Alan. You explained that very well. And it is about that. It's not about just quieting the mind so that it's just that. It's about opening the mind so it's more than that. Do you know? And again, it's your own personal odyssey. But why I want to bring mindfulness and mysticism together is that, to me, it is so ignitable to be able to be in the present moment and to delve so deep within and to have these phantasmagorical experiences that the chemicals in our brain can ignite. Do you know? It's limitless to what we can experience. Do you know? It's limitless, and bring it into the modern day context, to bring it into the mundaneness of it all. And it doesn't have to be that at all.
If there's a feminine incarnation of Rumi, you have brought your inner goddess, your inner Kuan Yin,
Well, I will, say his quote, Rumi's quote, which I always loved. I've visited churches, mosques, and temples but I found the divine within my own heart. I mean, that to me is coupling mysticism with the heart.
It couldn't be, from my humble opinion, a more essential dimension to highlight in the world of the world today. It's a trans-religious book, it's trans-spiritual, it's trans-Buddhist, post-mindfulness, post-mindfulness.
Well, let's take mindfulness, let's move it into the directions of which it is served well and reflects the times of which we are in. Nothing has to stay the same, as we know.
So radical evolution from.
Yes, you know, I'm proposing a element to mindfulness that maybe goes into another realm of perception that we are very capable of experiencing. You do talk about Buddhism, and you talk about, I mean, when I think of the Buddha, I don't know the Buddha, I didn't sit with the Buddha, I don't know what was in the Buddha's mind, but I can only imagine that the Buddha experienced just endless realms of consciousness to heights of which I can't even imagine.
The suttas, the classical discourses, all reference countless breathtaking miracles. And one could easily believe the common interpretation of that is not important. But when you study in a classical Buddhist culture, which I had the good fortune to have a very beginning training, I don't claim myself to be trained, but it is so integral to the experience that when you begin to mindfully meditate in a more intensive way with a good qualified guide teacher, you will naturally experience the phenomenology of the nuministic, the mystical.
Right.
And the beauty of it is they engage you in the intelligence of engaging it mindfully. So that you're not allured by it, attracted to it, steep in it, and then reinforce an unrecognized mystical narcissism, if you follow what I'm saying. Be mindful of where greed, anger, and delusion intersect with the allure of the numinous. And so this is, I guess, the intersection of mindfulness, mindful intelligence, and mystical awakening. Be smart, don't be mystical alone.
Yeah, and you know, when I think of what really drives us, you know, what the desire body yearns for and wants, and when I really sort of take in the collective of my observation of people and what it is that they want to catapult them into these other states, these other experiences, which for me are very fueled by things like greed and materialism and the moreness as opposed to the enoughness, and that it's an insatiable appetite for wanting really to feel something higher, something more, but very much not the type of divine brilliance, if you will, that we can really feel with much less than we're always driving towards out of greed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Do you know, I want to be mindful of acknowledging the mystical in these experiences that are not always driving us for more materialistically, but to have these natural experiences that bring us closer to the numinous experiences, to feeling that type of bliss because you're whirling to the sound of a hammer, as Rumi did, and that what is it that we're really desiring if not that?
And there's a whole spectrum of people out, I think many of us know, like the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, the late Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was a Canadian psychiatrist who started the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, 1957 to 1967. I was blessed to have gone to that school, but after he left. And he is one of the world's foremost, I guess, minds of highly developed consciousness who studied the paranormal. And I would recommend, along with Ora's book, Mindfulness and Mysticism, to also branch out from this book into Dr. Ian Stevens' book, 20 Cases of Rebirth, where the study of the phenomenology of continuity and the spectrum of consciousness, that taking the habit of life in this dimension alone as the only life that we're in, how easy it is to devoid ourselves of nature, as Ora brought up the trees, the light, and the animals, the birds, the sunsets. We're in this maddening miracle.
Yeah, this paradisical, it can be paradisical and heaven and hell right here, right on this earth plane. So what is it more, I say this mindfulness and mysticism merger, this great union, can be one that there is less hell and more bliss.
Bear with me on this very basic question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but, many of the savants, guides, leaders I've looked at over the years, climate collapse is a well-used phrase. We all know of our young Swede, Greta Thunberg, addressing the United Nations in 2019 and essentially telling men and women who are the leaders of the world, ambassadors of our blessed United Nations, we don't want any more of your fetish with money and economic growth. We want to save the world. She's essentially a cry for the mystical. My question. You're invited to the United Nations to speak for 10 minutes. I'm not saying speak for 10 minutes, but in essence, these are the people, the United Nations Security Council, these ambassadors. The world pays attention to these people. We talk all the time with our friends and colleagues about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the world of politics, of religion. Greta was there. Ora Nadrich is there because of telecommunications, and who knows? You should be there talking for a few minutes to the world about the nature of mindfulness and mysticism. What are some of the things that you might share with these people?
I would want to really share the deep knowing that is in our hearts, and hoping that I could connect to this collective that desires to do good in the world, to improve humanity. If the United Nations isn't for that, then what is it for? If it isn't about improving or celebrating humanity or loving humanity. Alan, all you can really ask anyone is to look deep within their heart. If I just said to everybody that was in that room, let's stop and let's close our eyes and venture within our own hearts. What do you see? What do you feel? And to have them go deeper and deeper and deeper within the depths of their hearts. Because we are moving so far away from our hearts. We have to just look at the way the world is playing itself out today. This is a world in which we have really lost our way from our own hearts and souls. I can't really ask for more than that.
Well, I will. I would say that anyone who watches this, anyone who hears Ora on any other podcasts, any book reviews, any television programs, any radio stations, my personal desire, knowing you and knowing your work, is gift this book to each of the ambassadors of the United Nations with a simple note, and said, I gift this to you to support you in your role as a global leader, to hear more carefully the cries of the world and to act more responsibly. May this be something that you cherish. And also, prime ministers and presidents worldwide, I say this on your behalf and on behalf of, I have a daughter, your mother, the children's children. If not now, when, as it's been said, if not by you and me, who? it's time to mystically activate not just our own innate, often repressed mysticism, but give that gift to someone else. And we never know how that music, that dance, that Rumi, that experience will ignite a revolution in their own mind, in their own family. It happened to me in my early years, and it continues to happen throughout my life, that I go, oh wow, look at the mistake that I've been calling right, and growing into that.
And I might add to that, you know, in the context of which you propose with the United Nations, I think, you know, it's really important to ask anybody who's in the role of leadership, where are you leading others? Where are you leading them to go? Where do you wish to lead them?
Yeah, my repressed president of the United States comes through and says, I want change immediately. Read the book, shut up, and do as we suggest, and vote against murder. Vote against weapons. Vote against nuclear arms. Stop sleepwalking to Armageddon, as it's been said.
Right.
We want the children to have a future where trees and seeds go together rather than a parched dystopian landscape. I'm not pessimistic. I'm saying I am radically urgent, and I think the mystical cry in me is a word in Buddhism known as samvega. It's a very challenging word, but it means spiritual urgency, where you're on a fire. You know when you meet your so-called twin flame and you're on fire? You meet a friend, an ally, and you can't believe the synergy and the sapio-transsexual union you feel with she or he or it or nature. You have an awe experience. Samvega is an emotion. It's rooted in mindfulness, if you could access it. It's the seed of mysticism, of wonderment, but it creates a sense of non-complacency, non-postponement. And so that's my inner president wanting to speak to the world.
Well said.
Anyway, I'm going to just tie this up because I know you have a long day, a busy day. And sometimes this isn't short, but this is potent. And let me close. We could talk in 10 different sessions and not touch even half of the topic. Mindfulness and mysticism. This is thousands of years of consciousness in this book. I would say eternity. And the future of life is in this book. This is an act of compassion, Ora.
Thank you.
This isn't just mysticism. This is an act of love for life. That's what I get from it, and I get from Ora and I've known each other well over 3 decades. You're a gift to this world, a gift to me, and a gift to the people that know you. And this book is a gift of love to the future of life. I can't recommend it enough. I can't recommend that you co-associate with Ora's work. She's written other books, her websites, and it's one thing to read and to listen and to see, but go in person to Ron and Ora's, not a workshop, it's a mystical sacred event. And induce your samvega, put aside whatever you think you need to do, and prioritize, wow, how rad is that? I am going to Omega Institute in October to listen, to feel, to my own deeper knowing. That's my rave for this book. Put yourself in the company and create a dialogue inside of yourself. And with these 2 remarkable people, Ron is not here, but he's a very beloved friend, and Ora obviously is a beloved friend. So from my heart to yours, Ora, thank you for taking the time. Share this video, share this information, and don't wait and get the book. From my heart to yours, thank you for taking the time.
Alan, thank you, dear
I'm
friend.
honored. Thank you.
Yeah, so nice to spend time with you, as always.
Blessed.